Parivrajakacharya Stotra Shata Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada ki, Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki, Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur ki, Prem Sattva Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Radha Shri Uttadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki, Shri Krishna Radha Krishna Gopinath Shankun Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki, Shri Mayapur Navadvip Dham ki, Jagannath Puri Dham ki, Ganga Mai ki, Yamuna Mai ki, Tulsi Devi ki, Bhakti Devi ki, Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki, Jai Shri Shri Radha Gopi Vallabha ki, Jai Shri Shri Jagannath Baldev Subhadra Maharani ki, Jai Shri Shri Gauranathai ki, Jai Shri Prabhupada ki, Sam Veda Bhakta Vrinda ki, Gaur Premanande, all glories to the Assembled, all glories to the Assembled Devotees, all glories to the Assembled Devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gaura, all glories to Shri. So we'll be reading from the Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 2, Text 37. Bhayam, please repeat. Bhayam द्वितीयाभिनिवेशता स्यात् ईशात् अपेतस्य विपर्ययो स्मृतिः तन्माययातो उदात् आभजेत् तं भक्त्येक येषां गुरु देवतात्मा वयं द्वितीया विनिवेशतस्य. Can we pull it up? Okay. So I'll just continue. Bhayam Tvitiya Viniveshatasya Ishadapetasya Viparyayo Smritihi Viparyayo Smritihi Tanmayayato Tanmayayato Buddha Abhajitam Tanmayayato Bhaktyeka yesham gurudevatatma. I'm just going to remove this so I can speak better. Vayam dvitiyavi nimeshatasya viniveshatasya ishadapetasya viparyayo smritihi tasya viparyayo smritihi tanmayayato huta abhajitam Bhaktyeka yesham gurudevatatma. Canto 11, chapter 2, text 36. 34. Oh, 37, sorry. 37. Sorry, the next verse. Yeah, pull it up. Go to the Sanskrit, please. Up. Chapter 2. Does anyone want to repeat? Does anyone feel particularly inspired to repeat the Sanskrit? If not, we can go to the translation. Yeah. Bhayam Kritiyabhini Gayam Kritiyabhini Visheta Sat. Sorry. Bhayam Tvitiya Viniveshatasya Ishadapetasya Viparyayo Smriti Tanmayayato Buddha Abhajittam Tanmayayato Buddha Abhajittam Bhaktyeka yesham gurudevatatma. Ishadapetasya viparyayo smritihi Tanmayayato Buddha Abhajittam Bhaktyeka yesham gurudevatatma. Ayam Tvitiya Viniveshatasya Ishadapetasya Viparyayo Smritihi Tanmayayato Buddha Abhajittam Bhatyekayesham Gurudeva Dharma. Please repeat after me again. Bhayam, fear. Vidya, in something seeming to be other than the Lord. Avini Veshata, because of absorption. Sya, it will arise. Isha, from the Supreme Lord. Apetasya, for one who has turned away. Viparyaya, misidentification. Asmritihi, forgetfulness. Tat, of the Lord. Mayaya, of by the illusory energy. Ataha, therefore. Buddha, an intelligent person. Avajit, should worship fully, Tam, him. Bhaktya, with devotion. Ekaya, unalloyed. Isham, the Lord. Guru Devata Atma, one who sees his own spiritual master as his Lord and very soul. So translation and purport by the disciple of His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. When the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. This bewildering, fearful condition is effected by the potency for illusion, called Maya. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, whom he should accept as his worshipable deity and as his very life and soul. Purport. It's a long purport, so bear with me. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the objection may be raised that since fear is caused by ignorance, it can be dispelled by knowledge, and there is no need to worship the Supreme Lord. The living entity falsely identifies with his material body, family, society, and so on, and he simply has to give up this false identification. Then what will Maya be able to do? In reply to this argument, Srila Sridhar Swami has quoted the following verse from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 14. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is very difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. The living entity called Jivatattva is one of the potencies of the Supreme Lord, but the constitutional position of the living entities is the Tatastha, or marginal. Being minute, every living entity is eternally dependent upon the Supreme Living Entity, Krishna. This is confirmed in the Vedic literature as follows. Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadhati Kama. Among all the eternally conscious beings, there is one supreme eternal living being who is supplying the needs of all the innumerable others. Katha Upanishad 2.1.12. Krishnadas Kaviraj has stated, Ekale Ishvara Krishna Arasabhritya. Krishna is the only independent controller. All other living entities depend upon him. Chaitanya Chaitamrita Adi Lila, chapter 5, text 142. Just as the finger is part and parcel of the body and therefore must always be engaged in bodily service, we as part and parcels of Krishna, Mamai Vamso Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, have the eternal duty, Sanatana Dharma, of engaging in unalloyed service of the Lord. The potency of the Lord that enlightens us in the Lord's service is called Chit Shakti. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments that when the living entity develops a spirit of independence, he is forced to come to the material world, where he enters into various types of petty and undesirable behavior that create a fearful situation for him. The Bahiranga Shakti, the illusory potency of the Supreme Lord, covers all trace of the Chit Shakti and imposes one material body after another upon the living entity for his gross sinful enjoyment. As further punishment, the living entity who has given up his loving relationship with Krishna loses all power to perceive the eternal blissful form of the Supreme Lord, who is his actual shelter. Instead, the living entity becomes attached to many temporary phantasmagorical forms, such as his personal body, the bodies of his family members and friends, his nation, his city, with its buildings and cars, and innumerable types of ephemeral material scenery. In such a state of gross ignorance, the idea of returning to one's original identity no longer even crosses his mind. Almost there. By the laws of God, the three modes of material nature are constantly in conflict. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, this conflict is described in many places in the Bhagavatam as guna vyatikaram. When the living entity is bewildered by the interactions of the modes of material nature, he comes to the conclusion of relativity and assumes that God and worship of God are simply byproducts of the relative contradictory interactions of nature's modes. In the name of anthropological, sociological, or psychological perspective, the living entity falls deeper and deeper into the darkness of materialistic ignorance, dedicating himself to mundane piety, economic development, sense gratification, or speculation, in which he regards the absolute as lacking variety and personality, which he assumes to be the products of the interactions of the nature's modes. The illusory potency of the Supreme Lord is called Duratyaya. It is impossible to escape without the direct mercy of Krishna. Mam evaye prapadyante maya me tam taranti te. The example may be given that when the sun is covered by clouds, no man-made apparatus can remove them from the sky. But the sun itself, which created the clouds, can immediately burn away the clouds covering and reveal itself. Similarly, when we become covered by the illusory potency of the Lord, we identify with a temporary material body, and thus we are always in fear and anxiety. But when we surrender to the Lord himself, he can immediately free us from this illusion. The material world is padam yat vipadam. It is dangerous at every step. When a living entity understands that he is not the material body, but an eternal servant of God, his fear is vanquished. As stated by Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, Atra bhakte samsara bandhan na bhetavyam sahi bhakto paravartamanasya svata eva yati. In this Bhagavad Dharma, devotees have no need to fear the bondage of material existence. The fear goes away of its own accord for one who engages in devotional service. It is important to make clear that bhayam or fear cannot ultimately be vanquished or simply by impersonal self-realization, as expressed in the words Aham Brahmasmi, I'm spirit soul. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 5, Text 12, Narad Muni says to Vyasadeva, Neshkarmyam api achuta bhava varjitam nam shobhate. Mere namish karmyam, or cessation of material activities and repudiation of the bodily concept of life, cannot ultimately save one. The living entity must find a superior shelter on the spiritual platform, otherwise he will come back to the fearful situation of material existence. This is stated in Shastra. Aruya trichena param padam tata patanti adona trita yusmad ankraya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 2, Text 32. Although one may, with great labor and effort, struggle up to the Brahman platform, Klesho Dikataras Tesham Avyaktas Sakta Dasham, if he does not find a suitable shelter, he will come back to the material platform. His so-called liberation is vimuktamana, or liberation by imagination. The living entity is by nature pleasure-seeking, Ananda. Now we are suffering because we are falsely seeking pleasure on the material platform, and as a result, we are becoming entangled in the painful complexities of material existence. But if we try to give up the pleasure-seeking propensity altogether, we shall eventually become frustrated and return to the platform of material pleasure seeking. Although there is eternal existence on the Brahman platform of impersonal realization, there is no Ananda. Variety is the mother of enjoyment. In the Vaikuntha planets, there is actual spiritual Ananda. Krishna is there in his ecstatic spiritual form, surrounded by his blissful associates, all of them eternally full of bliss and knowledge. They have nothing to do with material existence. In the spiritual planets, even the scenery and the birds and the animals are fully conscious of Krishna and are absorbed in transcendental bliss. Yat gatva na nivartante tadhama paramam mama. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text 6. One who goes to the blissful spiritual planet of Krishna will be fully satisfied and never come back to the material platform. Therefore, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has said, Kim Chatra Bhakte Samsara Bandhan Na Vetavyam. Only Bhakta actually becomes free of fear. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has emphasized the necessity of accepting a bona fide spiritual master who is Vrajendra Nandana Preshta, the dearmost servitor of the son of Nanda Maharaj, Krishna. The bona fide spiritual master is completely free from envy of other living entities, and therefore he freely distributes knowledge of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the living entity who are inimical to the service of the Lord somehow hear this knowledge submissively, they become free from the illusory potency of the Lord, which has covered them and thrown them into various miserable species of life. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, by the mercy of the spiritual master, the faithful disciple gradually realizes transcendental possession of Lord Narayan, who is served with great awe and reverence by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune. As the disciple's transcendental knowledge gradually increases, even the Parameshwarya, or the supreme opulence of the Lord of Vaikuntha, becomes pale in the light of the beauty of Govinda, Krishna. Govinda has inconceivable potency to enchant and give pleasure, and by the mercy of the spiritual master, the disciple gradually develops his own blissful relationship, rasa, with Govinda. Having understood the blissful pastimes of Lakshmi Narayan, Sri Sita Ram, Rukmini Dwarkadish, and finally Lord Krishna himself, the purified living entity is given the unique privilege of participating directly in the devotional service of Krishna, who becomes his only object and shelter. Fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. When the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. This bewildering, fearful condition is effected by the potency for illusion called Maya. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service of this Lord under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, whom he should accept as his worshipable deity and his very life and soul. We'll just do the Mangala Charan or invocation prayers. Om Ajnanatimiratasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Tadamayam Dadati Shvamantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vidantam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhantanscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinavando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Shute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaycha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna everyone. That was a longer one, huh? Long for a word, but a very, very, I would say, a very instructive and holistic understanding of the verse that we're discussing today. So today's talk is, as we get ready for Nrsimha Chaturdasi, the appearance day for Nrsimha Day, which is coming up in about 2 weeks, we decided that we should speak something on the pastime itself of Lord Nrsimhadev and his appearance as a half man, half lion to protect his devotee Prahlad. But before we get there, I just, on behalf of Shri Radha Gokul Ananda, Shri Jagannath Baldev Subhadra, and Shri Gauranitai, and Srila Prabhupada, I would like to welcome each and every one of you to ISKCON Boston. It's actually my good fortune that I've been given this opportunity to speak on something. So I sincerely ask for all your blessings so that I may be able to say something of value and also some things for my own spiritual emancipation. So in this world, it said, there are 3 most powerful emotions. Can anyone name them? We have a small group here. What are the 3 most powerful emotions? Does anyone know? I mean, I have the answer, but I'll give you guys a chance too. Any guesses? Sorry? Anger? Okay. Love? Okay. Happiness? Okay. Fear? Oh, okay. Anyone else? So, yes. Envy. Okay. So, happiness, anger, envy, they're all extensions of, they're all emotions in themselves, but the 3 most powerful emotions, according to research, are love, hate, and fear. And in this verse, we're specifically going to be talking about how we can deconstruct this idea of fear, right? It's actually, if we look at this verse, just a translation, it is, in my opinion, the magic formula on where the fear comes from and how to overcome it. So, again, the title of today's talk is Attaining Fearlessness Through the Fearsome Lord. But before we get to attaining fearlessness, let's take a step back and unpack what fear is. So where does fear actually come from? This is actually a very important question, because if we analyze our life from a day-to-day basis, we will see that, at least I can speak for myself, that our life is actually dictated by fear. If we're happy, then we're scared or we're fearful that that happiness will be taken away. And if we're unhappy, then we're fearful that we'll just stay unhappy for eternity, right? So many anxieties and fear exist, and they actually prevent us from showing up as the genuine version of ourselves. So it's also, one other stat I would like to throw out there is that 30% of our fear is coming from the past, from situations we've been in the past. 20% of the fear is what may happen in the future. Okay, so that's 50%. And then 20% of the fears are completely irrational. This is not me saying this. This is like a psychology journal saying this. So you have 30% that is coming from the past, 20%, so that's 50% of what might happen into the future, and 20% of the fears are completely irrational. So 70% of the things we fear are actually like, we have no control over it. If you think about it, we can't change the past. We can't really predict the future. And the other 20% is completely irrational. Just think about that for a second. 70% of our day-to-day life is being dictated by something that we have no control over. They're completely useless, right? So our life is dictated by fear. So it's very important for us to ask, why am I so fearful all the time? And the Nava Yogendras in this verse, they say that fear arises when the living entity misidentifies itself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. And in other words, what that is saying is that whenever we associate ourselves with a reality that is not the absolute or the primary reality, that is a reality that is separate from Krishna, that is a reality that is secondary reality, it's at that moment where fear creeps in. So what does it mean to have a reality or to associate with a reality that is separate from Krishna? Now let's take an example of Hiranyakashipu specific to, Nrsimhadev. Hiranyakashipu, for those of you who don't know, was the father of a great devotee, Prahlad, was very inimical to the Lord Krishna or Lord Narayan. And so he tried to have Prahlad killed by various attempts. He failed, and then he tried to kill Prahlad himself. And at that time, Nrsimhadev appeared and protected his devotee who was attacked. So in one way, we can say Nrsimhadev was the first advocate of child protective services in the existence. So the literal meaning of Hiranyakashipu means one who is after gold and soft bedding. Hiranyakashipu, the reason why he was so powerful and he was willing to kill Prahlad and even go against the Lord himself was because he had actually done a lot of tapasya and asked for a boon from Brahma. And that boon was that I want to become immortal. Brahma had said, even I have to die. How can I grant immortality when I don't have it myself? So he said, fine, let me not be killed in day and night. Let me not be killed by animal or man. Let me not be killed by any type of weapon, day and night, as I said, not in the sky, not in the ground, not in the air, not in the water, not inside the building, not outside the building. Like this, he tried to catch every loophole and address that, which made him practically immortal, but not quite immortal, right? Now, so let's think of it this way. He did all this tapasya, all this austerity, all this effort to gain an opulence, right? To gain practical immortality, if not full immortality. And then what did he do with that opulence? He did what his name suggests. He went after gold, and I don't have to explain what soft bedding means. It does not mean duvet sheets for anyone wondering. But in this way, Hiranyakashipu, he started to use the opulence that was granted to him by Brahma to satisfy his own selfish desires. And in this way, this is what it means to start living a reality separate from Krishna. Because the opulence is coming from whom? The opulence is coming from Krishna. And yet you're starting to use that opulence to satisfy what our desires are independent of Krishna. It's like someone giving you a gift, or someone saying, hey, I'm loaning some money to you, and then you coming back and saying, no, now that money is mine, I don't have to give it back, right? And in this way, what that also perpetrated is because of this opulence, he had so much opulence, he couldn't be killed with all these conditions in place. He started to believe, I am God. Who will kill me? I cannot be killed. I cannot be killed any man or animal, so who's going to kill me? And in this way, he started to put himself as a center and started to act as the Lord of all that he surveyed. This is also what we see with Ravan. Ravan also got a similar boon that he may not be killed by any god, any demigod or anything. But the one thing he forgot is that he's in that condition. He said that he didn't put man in there, and that's why when Lord Ramchandra appeared, he appeared as Madhava Purushottam, as a man. Then eventually killed him. In short, what I'm trying to say is Hiranyakashipu was trying to manifest an alternate reality by using the opulence that was awarded to him by Brahma to satisfy his own desires, rather than use that in the service of Krishna and his devotees. And in this way, he started to think that he's the Lord himself. He is the supreme enjoyer, he's the supreme controller, he's the supreme proprietor. Now, this is actually in contrast to what actual reality is. What is the actual reality for a conditioned soul? The actual reality for a conditioned soul is Jiva Swarupoy Krishna Nitya Das. The eternal position, the deepest reality for a conditioned soul is that he's the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. Jiva the soul. Swarup Hoy. Swarup is like his true form. Hoy, it happens to be Krishna Nityadas, not just the servant of Krishna, but the eternal servant of Krishna. Now, when we look at what Hiranyakashipu's position is, he's saying, I am the Lord. I am not the servant of the Lord, I am the Lord. So you can very clearly see, I hope you can all appreciate, that there's a clear contrast between the reality that Hiranyakashipu was living versus the reality that's actually going on. Right? Now, why am I going into so much detail into what Hiranyakashipu did and everything? Because, dear devotees, when we read the Bhagavatam, we come across two types of characters. And I'm smiling because I'll tell you in a bit. One type of character is a devotee. They give us examples of what we should do. But the other example is an atheist or someone who is antagonistic towards the idea of God consciousness. And we can also take lessons from that. The lesson that we can take from them is, of course, what not to do. But more importantly, how much of their behavior are we mirroring in our heart? A lot of us, and I see this, I include, including myself, we worked so hard to get a university degree. We did bachelor's and master's and then doctorate, and now we have this wonderful job. And we are living in, relatively speaking, with the world, it's quite opulent, our lifestyle in the West. And how much of that lifestyle, of that opulence that we have been awarded by Krishna, are we actually using in Krishna's service? And how much percentage of what we have been awarded are we using so that our external and internal senses can be gratified? External senses, for devotees, we are very adept into making sure that that is being addressed, and we're using, even when we eat for food, we are eating the sadhana. Or even if we are like, oh, this tastes so good, we're like, wow, this is actually Krishna's energy. But more importantly, dear devotees, is I want us to take an inventory of how are we using our opulence to gratify our internal subtle desires. To what degree are we using our opulence to enforce a position, to enforce our authority, to enforce this sense of false proprietorship or false onto others. In this way, how many of us, to what degree are we using this opulence to actually gratify our false ego? I think that is addressing our externals is easy, but then taking that layer apart and going deep and seeing how much am I using this opulence to gratify my false ego? I think that is just equally important, and if not more. So we should understand that to the degree we use our opulence to serve ourselves, to that degree we are actually living a reality that is separate from Krishna, like Hiranyakashipu. And the more we actually use our opulence that is granted by Krishna to serve ourselves, the more that fear is going to happen. Now, how does this actually lead to? So the first point was fear manifests when we live a reality separate from Krishna. Second point is, how is that reality separate from Krishna? How does that come about? When we start to use that opulence to gratify our own senses. Now, how does that gratifying our own senses, how does that actually lead to fear? Because we have to make that connection. We know that the four material necessities are eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. These are, animal does it, it's very much required for the propagation of the human population, even for God conscious population, right? But what happens is, more often than not, the world, what it starts to do is it starts to use the first three anyways, eating, sleeping, mating, as sources of their pleasure, and starts to use their opulence to over-gratify themselves and overindulge in the first three activities. What does that do? It gives us a false sense of pleasure or a temporary sense of pleasure. And the fourth one is interesting. Defending, we don't really get pleasure from it, but yet it's a necessity. Why? Because we are actually defending against any sort of antagonism towards the first three. Okay? So to the degree that we use our opulence to maximize the pleasure that we get from eating, sleeping, mating, to that degree, we will live in constant fear that these three will either decrease in quality or they will cease. And that's where this fourth necessity comes in, defending. We don't just defend against anything, we defend against aspects that will inhibit the first three necessities. And that's why it becomes that necessity. Does that point make sense? So to the degree we are using our material opulence to maximize our pleasure, to that degree, we will actually become anxious that what if this opulence or what if this pleasure is taken away from me? And to that degree, we'll start to live in fear. Okay? So that wraps up the first half of the verse. I have like 16 minutes to wrap up the second, which is the bulk of the talk, which is how. So now we've talked about, okay, we have this, where does fear come from? Fear comes from manifest in our life because we're living in a reality that is separate from Krishna. How are we living in a reality separate from Krishna? We live in that reality by using the opulence that's granted to us to satisfy our own senses, so that, and we start to see that we start to think that we are the Supreme Lord, but rather we are, and we ignore the actual reality, which is that we are the servant of the Supreme Lord. Right? And the more we use our opulence to gratify our senses, the more we will become anxious and live in fear that eventually that opulence will be taken away and our level of enjoyment or pleasure will cease or decrease. So how do we overcome this fear? Right? Everyone is trying to overcome fear on a physical, intellectual, mental level. Physical, you can say like, health policies and insurance policies, we try to make sure that we mitigate that, which is required to some degree. On the mental level, a lot of individuals will also take up to intoxicants. When we look at why people take intoxicants, it's not to do with when you take away all the layers, it's just so that they can forget about their fears and anxieties for a temporary period, and that fear is mitigated temporarily. And then when we try to resolve fear on an intellectual level, I saw this one quote, if you have a problem and you can't do anything about it, then why worry? If you don't have a problem, then why worry? If you have a problem and you can't do something about it, then why worry? It looks really good as a pictogram. But then the moment we shut our laptop, we log off Facebook and we walk away, that fear is back. That anxiety is back. So even on the intellectual, mental, physical level, all these are temporary solutions, right? And this was the case with Hiranyakashipu. He tried to, by getting that boon from Brahma, what was he trying to do? He was trying to protect his physical body through a materialistic solution. But did that work out for him? To what degree did that work out for him? There's one thing to say that he passed away in his sleep. He was ripped. His intestines were being thrown out of his body. Right? So even with all these different, we try to cook up all these materialistic solutions to overcome fear, but they might provide us with some relief temporarily, but in the grand scheme of things, if they don't. Now let's look at Prahlad Maharaj. Or let's actually, before we get there, let's look at this verse. So the Navayamedras in this verse, they say that Buddha avajit kam, that if we're intelligent, we can find a way to overcome this fearfulness in its entirety. And what's that way? That way is bhaktyaka yesham gurudevatatma. Practice devotional service unto the Supreme Lord under the direction of Guru. And this is what Prahlad Maharaj does, right? Prahlad Maharaj, he was instructed when he was in the womb of his mother Kayadu by Narad Muni, his spiritual master. And he took that and he just made it his life. He perfected the devotional anga of Smarana. Shukadev Goswami perfected the devotional anga of Kirtanam. Parikshit Maharaj perfected the devotional anga of, or devotional limb of hearing, Shravanam. But Prahlad Maharaj, he perfected the devotional limb of Smarana, which is the art of remembering Krishna. And just through this process, he was able to attain fearlessness. Right? And the way he did this is, it was very evident. They would ask him, Prahlad, they gave him poison, and they said, Prahlad, weren't you fearful that you're being given poison? And he said that when the demigods and the gods were churning the milk ocean, what came out of that? Poison. What also came out of that? Lakshmi. So he said, Lakshmi is actually the sister of poison. And Lakshmi is the eternal consort of my father, Narayan. He was saying, so poison is my maternal uncle. So why would my maternal uncle want to harm me? Right? We shouldn't, maybe this is for Prahlad Maharaj. We should be very mindful of where our level is. When he was put in fire, they said, aren't you fearful? He said, why? Yagyave Vishnu. Fire is said to be the mouth of Lord Vishnu. If I enter my father's mouth, will my father hurt me? The lions, and they pick up their cubs with their mouth, the same teeth that they use to kill a prey, they use that same mouth to pick up their cubs, but the cubs are not injured in any way. Right? The pit of snakes, Prahlad was thrown. They said, Prahlad, weren't you fearful? Why? My father rests on Anantashesh. Anantashesh is the king, the head, the master of all snakes. So the snakes are the servants of the servant of my father, and I'm the son. So why would I be scared? Right? When it came down to the crescendo of the pastime, where Hiranyakashipu asked Prahlad, you keep on talking about this God, where is your God? Is he here? Prahlad said, yes, he's everywhere. Right? And he said, is he in this pillar? And Prahlad said, yes, he's in this pillar. And Hiranyakashipu whips out his sword and he says, if he's in this pillar, then I'm going to smash this pillar, kill your God, and then kill you. And he goes and he smashes the pillar. And what happens? Out comes Nrsimhadev. Right? So what was Prahlad doing by remembering Vishnu in this way? He was actually seeing the Supreme Lord at every moment in his life. His reality was that I am not just a servant of God, but God is all around me. He understood Krishna as he is. He understood him as the supreme controller, the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor. And then he linked and he said, if that is who Krishna is, then what is my position? I'm the servant of this Lord. And so everywhere he would go, he would just see Krishna and see himself in relation to Krishna, relation to Vishnu. Right? And so then when it actually, and how did that translate, that remembrance, how did that translate into his day-to-day activities? If you have understood Krishna, your worshipable Lord, to be the proprietor of anything, then whatever opulence you get, what you do, you just re-engage it in his service. And so that aspect or that activity that makes you want to live an alternate reality, you're not even performing it. So your reality is very much aligned to what the absolute reality is, which is in union with Krishna. See, the trick is that we have to use our opulence in the service of Krishna and his devotees, but to do that in a sustainable, intentional, and consistent manner, we need to practice Krishna consciousness or devotional service. Because devotional service gives us the means by which we can change our thinking and therefore change our lifestyle. And by changing, and what is that change in lifestyle? Is that we use our opulence to serve Krishna, not to serve ourselves. And when we use it to serve Krishna, and we understand that Krishna is the owner of everything, that fear of that, oh, this opulence will be taken away, doesn't really exist, because it's like, if I'm giving Krishna I have 5 laddus, and every day I give Krishna 1 laddu, but one day he takes all 3. Then I'm like, okay, Krishna, you take all 3, it's fine. Whatever opulence you give me, I'm just going to give it back to you anyways. So you have no fear. right? If we start it, and practically what we can start doing is, I try to, and, I try to do this is that I'm not perfect at it, but even when we say in terms of our jobs or in terms of our careers, and we have, everyone has this fear that, what if they get let go or this or that. But if you're genuinely seeing that as a means to serve Krishna, as a means to generate Lakshmi, so you can serve the devotees, you can serve your family members who are devotees, then if that fear does not exist, because it's like, Krishna, this is yours anyways. Whatever I'm getting is yours anyways. Right? So by understanding that Krishna is our ever loving, ever well-wishing friend, and he's present in every moment of life, in every moment of our life, then we start to live a life of genuine and deep fearlessness. It's not recklessness. Please don't confuse the two. There's a very big difference between the two, recklessness and fearlessness. We live a life of fearlessness, not recklessness. And how do we guard ourselves from recklessness? We understand that everything is Krishna's, so I have to take care of it properly. Like for our homes, one simple meditation is just understanding that this is not my house, this is Krishna's house. I'm just the caretaker. If you put yourself in that position, then won't you take care of your house very properly, making sure everything is clean, all the expenses are being very well managed, because you're the caretaker of Krishna's house. So you don't live recklessly, you live fearlessly. Right? So the summary of the second part is such. So we have to first understand, how do we get over fear? The first point is we have to understand that material solutions, they might provide temporary benefit, but they don't provide full benefit. Hiranyakashipu, when he asked for the boon temporarily, he got that sense of immortality, but eventually Nrsimhadev came and ripped him to shreds. The spiritual solution, however, it grants the devotee ultimate fearlessness. And Prahlad Maharaj is the example of this. He practiced Vishnu Smarana, just one anga of devotional service. And constant remembrance of Vishnu came, and then through that he was able to use whatever opulence he had in Vishnu or Krishna's service. Right? And that is how devotional service actually gives us fearlessness, because we're no longer anxious about what's in it for me. We're just like, whatever I have is yours, Krishna. You're the one who gave it to me. So I'm just giving it back to you. Now, how do we practice this? And I've given some indications, but I want to spend maybe the last 2 minutes, just giving a few suggestions of how we can do this practically. The first and foremost way we can do this practically is just reading about devotees who are fearless. We have Srila Prabhupada, we can read the Srila Prabhupada Lamrita. Bruce, if you read the Srila Prabhupada Lamrita, you will genuinely understand how Srila Prabhupada was completely fearless. I moved to Boston at the age, last year, at the age of 30, and I had work supported me, the temple. The reason why I wasn't fearful is because the institution that Srila Prabhupada set up was here. Srila Prabhupada moved to the West from India at the age of 69 on a cargo ship. And he not only moved, but he establishes one of the most prolific spiritual movements in the world that after 50 years is still going strong. It's still growing. That is what you call fearlessness. That is what, to do that level of work at that age, Prabhu's, come on. Right? And it also helps studying. That is just an example of Srila Prabhupada. But when we read the Bhagavatam, we will see all these stories of devotees, Prahlad Maharaj, Parikshit Maharaj, right? We start to also see how they actually gave all opulence that they received back in Krishna's service. The second one is, and a later from that is, start to plan how we can actually actually have a plan written out on how we can start to use whatever opulence we have in the service of Krishna devotees. If you're hungry, make bhoga, offer it to Krishna, it becomes prasadam. If you have a place, invite 1 or 2 devotees. Understand that this is Krishna's house. I'm just a caretaker. What would Krishna like if I was the caretaker? He would like his devotees to come to his house, right? If you have knowledge, another opulence, use it to study Srila Prabhupada's books, right? And the third way, and I'll end with this, is just take a moment to introspect. You know, my dear devotees, when we take the time to introspect and write down, even if you can't write, okay, write it. If you don't have a book, write it on your phone. You can't make a note on your phone. Speak to somebody, just tell a devotee this is what happened. You can't speak to a devotee, speak to yourself, but have some record of where you highlight or you detail the moment where you felt Krishna's presence in your life and he protected you. Because what that will start doing is you start that once, you will do it again, and it make you increasingly more sensitive to Krishna's presence in your life. And eventually you'll get to a point where you'll see at every stage of your life, Krishna is there with you 110%. Imagine having that confidence where you walk into a room and you know Krishna is there with you. He's right beside you. How fearless you'll feel. So to summarize, today we spoke about where does fear come from? Fear comes from the fact fear comes from a place when we start to live a different reality separate from Krishna. And we start to do that when we start to use our material opulence granted to us by Krishna and his devotees in our own service rather than in his service. How do we overcome that fear? We engage in devotional service, which allows us to, again, build that mindset so we can use our opulence in Krishna's service and negate that fear, negate the root cause of fear. And what does this look like practically? Make a plan. See how you can actually plan it out on a monthly basis on how you're using whatever Krishna has given you in the service of devotees. Read the stories of devotees who are fearless. They say you're the average of the 5 people you associate with. So if you associate with 2 books of 5 fearless devotees, guess what? You will also become a fearless devotee, right? And introspect, write down, jot down, keep a tab of when Krishna has appeared in your life. He's appeared multiple times, but when you have noticed, when you have felt his presence, and you will see that Krishna is actually protecting you, even now, at every step. And with a minute to spare, Hare Krishna. What we have to do is that fear. And simultaneously we will see.
Krishna Krishna Srimate Vedanta Swami Itinamine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gaura Prasadi Nirvisa Janavadi Sata Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kabuni Janana Jabuin the Katahas and Goblo them the Susi Kopina Shimakuna Girigo, Brinam, Matura Goldanki, Jamuna Dunki, Tosimana Nikian, Sula Prabala Girian, Samala Nikian, Midai Goblo over yourself some of the body, over yourself some of the body. Namaste Narasrinaya. Namaste Narasrinaya.
Krishna, Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to our Sunday Feast program. We would like to thank, first of all, His Grace Sadhguru Prabhu, who has sponsored today's feast in memory of his aunt, Srimati Uma Puri. So we would like to pray on this occasion of his sponsoring today's feast on his aunt's name. So let's offer our praise to Shri Radha Gopalava by chanting one Hare Krishna Mahamritam. So please join with me. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. As you all know, we have started our temple program as usual before the pandemic. How our center used to be open, so we are open like that. So please do take advantage of all our activities at the temple. We are open right from Monday to Friday, Monday to Sunday. So from Monday to Friday, we are open on all days. So you can come in the morning and in the evening. During the darshan hours, we can take darshan, and as well as on Saturdays and Sundays, we are open all day for the darshan. So please take a note of those timings. And we have on Saturdays, we have the Saturday night Kirtan. It starts from 6 o'clock and ends around 8:30, 9, sometimes 9:30 p.m. And then Sundays, as usual, we have 5 to 6 for this Sunday class, and 6 to 6:30 the Sunday arti, and 6:30 we have announcements and to go to shower. So these are our regular temple activities. Apart from that, we are going to have special activities now in this particular month. In the month of May, we're going to have His Grace Radhesham Prabhu, who's going to come. He is a temple president of ISKCON Pune, and he has been a pioneer in youth preaching, especially the student, the people, the students community. He had a very vast and very wonderful student outreach program. It's a successful outreach program. He has generated, created, and successfully run all over the world, and especially in India, which has been adapted by so many different temples, and all over the world they are trying to model the temple, the Pune temples program. So we here at ISKCON Boston are trying to follow that model, and of course along with the along with US culture and US ways of approaching the students. So that's what we are trying to do here at ISKCON Boston. So please do take advantage of his presence and his stay at ISKCON Boston. For 21 days, he's going to be here. Not 1 day, not 2 days. He's going to be here for 21 days. 21 straight days he's here, and he is a monk for more than 3 decades. So he studied from a very esteemed and the premier institute of India, Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai. So it's very rare people get admission into that college, into that university. And from there he graduated, and after that he dedicated, he worked for a couple of years, and then he dedicated his entire life to ISKCON, to the Bhakti movement, practicing Bhakti himself and spreading the Bhakti to all other students, primarily to the student community. And he has generated so many devotees. He has created and developed this student community all over the world. The students are spread all across the world, and they are leading so many programs in ISKCON. So we have this wonderful opportunity to have him here at ISKCON Boston, where he will conduct so many different programs for the students, right from day one onwards to the last day, up to the 20th of May, 21st of the May. 24th of the May, we'll be having different kinds of programs. Every weekend there is a retreat for the students, and of course he's going to speak on Sundays here at ISKCON Boston. So do take advantage of that of Sundays, and as well as there will be during the weekdays, there will be weekdays and weekends there will be Srimad Bhagavatam class there, which we will telecast live, and there will
will actually cast it on the Zoom. So please take advantage of that as well. So this is about the upcoming programs for all the student communities. Another thing we would like to welcome Erla Mataji's and actually Janardhan's grandmother and the aunt, they are here. So I think they are here. Janardhan, yes, thank you, welcome. And she's the aunt. Okay. And where is your grandmother? Okay, there is here, there she goes. So this is a wonderful family. They have been with us for with our ISKCON Boston for a long time. His father used to come here, and of course, due to unfortunate incident that his father left the body, but however, they are still connected to us. He's an upcoming monk, and he wants to become a monk. So we wish him well, and we welcome him to be part of ISKCON Boston as a monk. But however, we take this an opportunity and welcome both his aunt and his grandmother for the first time to ISKCON Boston. So let us welcome them loudly, wholeheartedly by chanting one time Haribol to this wonderful family. Haribol! 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 Yes. One more thing, I think all the children, they're going to have, if any children wants to participate, Sunday school is going to do a students activity in the Boston Public Park. There'll be various activities along with the egg hunt. So if you want, if any parents are there and they want to have their children participate in that, so please take advantage of these activities. So it will be a half an hour event. You can go in the Boston Common, Boston Public Park, and you can come after half an hour. The shaman will be reserved for you if you're going there. Thank you, Hare Krishna. But of course, those who want to sponsor a feast, okay, you are welcome to sponsor. It's at $201. So for the Sunday feast. And upcoming festival, it's on April 15th, Sunday. We'll be celebrating Narasimha Chaturdashi. Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna. Sorry, May 15th. Thank you. Yeah, May 15th. Sorry.